The darkness is complete. 50 feet of reinforced concrete and packed earth separate the bunker from the world above. For weeks, American bombs have pounded Baghdad. But down here, in this underground fortress, Saddam Hussein sits untouched. His engineers promised him invincibility. They calculated every variable, reinforced every weakness, built walls that could withstand anything conventional warfare could deliver. They were wrong. In 4 minutes, a weapon designed in just 2 weeks will do what every military expert said was impossible. But this story doesn't begin in the Iraqi desert in 1991. It begins decades earlier in a different kind of war. A war where the most powerful weapons were the ones never fired, where 2 superpowers built enough destructive force to end human civilization multiple times over, and somehow, impossibly, restraint held. This is the story of the Cold War. 45 years of walking a tightrope over the abyss. And to understand how close we came to falling, we need to go back to the very beginning. February 1945. The Second World War is ending, but the next one is already taking shape. At Yalta, a resort town on the Black Sea, 3 men sit down to divide the world. Franklin Roosevelt, dying though nobody yet knows it. Winston Churchill, the British bulldog. And Joseph Stalin, the Soviet strongman who survived Hitler and knows he can outlast anyone. They carve up Europe like a dinner roast. Germany split into occupation zones. Poland's borders redrawn. Spheres of influence negotiated over brandy and cigars. The meeting is cordial enough. These men are allies, after all. They've just defeated Nazi Germany together. But beneath the diplomatic smiles, the fault lines are already forming. 5 months later, everything changes. July 16th, 1945. The New Mexico desert. At exactly 5:29 in the morning, the world enters the atomic age, the Trinity test, mankind's first nuclear explosion. A flash brighter than 1,000 suns, a mushroom cloud rising 7 miles into the sky. Robert Oppenheimer, watching his creation, remembers a line from Hindu scripture. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." 3 weeks after that, Hiroshima. Then Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. The war ends. And suddenly, the United States possesses a weapon that can level entire cities in seconds. No other nation has this capability. Not yet. The atomic monopoly lasts exactly 4 years. In those 4 years, the world transforms. September 1945. A Soviet cipher clerk named Igor Gozenko walks out of the embassy in Ottawa, carrying 109 documents proving Soviet espionage networks throughout the West. His defection exposes something many suspected, but few could prove. The wartime alliance is over. The Soviets are already treating their former allies as enemies. March 5, 1946. Winston Churchill stands in a small college gymnasium in Fulton, Missouri, and speaks words that will define an era. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Not a metaphor, a reality. Europe divided, East versus West, communist versus capitalist. A line drawn through the heart of a continent still bleeding from the last war. President Harry Truman, sitting on the stage behind Churchill, knows what's coming. In exactly 1 year, he'll announce the Truman Doctrine, committing American resources to contain Soviet expansion wherever it appears. Greece, Turkey. Anywhere communism threatens to spread. The policy has a name: containment. The idea is simple. The Soviets want to expand. America will block them. Not with invasion, not with conquest, just by being there. By drawing a line and saying, this far, no further. But containment requires commitment, money, military presence, the willingness to stay engaged in Europe indefinitely, something Americans have never done before. And it requires something else, the belief that this matters. that what happens in Greece or Turkey or Berlin affects American security. June 1948. The Soviets test that commitment. Berlin sits deep in the Soviet occupation zone of Germany, but the city itself is split into 4 sectors: American, British, French, and Soviet. Stalin sees an opportunity. He orders a blockade. No food, fuel, or supplies can reach West Berlin by land or water. The city's 2 million residents face starvation. The Western Allies face a choice: abandon Berlin or risk war with the Soviets to supply it. They choose a third option. For 318 days, Allied aircraft fly into Berlin around the clock. At the operation's peak, a plane lands every 30 seconds. Pilots sleep in their cockpits between flights. More than 200,000 flights deliver 4,700 tons of supplies daily. Coal, food, medicine, everything a city needs, delivered by air. Stalin finally lifts the blockade in May 1949, but the message is clear: the West will not back down. That same year, everything changes again. April 1949, NATO forms. 12 nations pledge that an attack on one is an attack on all. For the first time in history, America enters a permanent peacetime military alliance. No more isolationism, no more sitting out European conflicts. The United States is now committed to defending Western Europe indefinitely. August 1949. The Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb. The American nuclear monopoly is over. 4 years. That's all it lasted. Now, both superpowers have the bomb. But possessing nuclear weapons and building enough to destroy your enemy are different things. That arms race is just beginning. October 1949. Mao Zedong declares the People's Republic of China. The world's most populous nation goes communist. Suddenly, containment doesn't just mean Europe, it means Asia. It means everywhere. And then it means war. June 25, 1950. North Korean forces pour across the 38th parallel, invading South Korea. The Cold War turns hot. Not between the superpowers directly, that would risk nuclear escalation, but through proxies. North Korea backed by China and the Soviet Union. South Korea backed by the United States and the United Nations. Over 3 million people will die before it ends in stalemate 3 years later. Korea establishes the pattern. The superpowers can't fight each other directly. The stakes are too high. Nuclear weapons make conventional war between them unthinkable, so they fight everywhere else. They arm opposing sides. Supply weapons, training, money. Watch them kill each other. Call it a proxy war, as if the distance makes the deaths less real. Vietnam, Angola, Afghanistan, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Cambodia, Mozambique. The list grows longer every decade. Over 11 million people die in these conflicts. Most of their names never appear in American or Soviet history books. They weren't American or Soviet. They were farmers and villagers and civilians caught between 2 giants who couldn't strike each other directly, so they struck everywhere else. But the real terror isn't the wars that happen. It's the war that almost does. October 1962. American U-2 spy planes photograph Soviet missile installations in Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. Medium-range ballistic missiles capable of hitting Washington, New York, and most major American cities with nuclear warheads. President Kennedy goes on television. The United States will blockade Cuba. Soviet ships approaching the island will be turned back. If the missiles aren't removed, America will invade. For 13 days, the world holds its breath. Soviet ships steam toward Cuba. American destroyers form a blockade line. Both sides are on highest nuclear alert. Bomber crews sleep next to their aircraft. Missile crews wait for launch orders. The world has never been closer to nuclear war. Deep underwater, a Soviet submarine, B-59, sits trapped by American destroyers. For hours, they've been dropping practice depth charges, non-lethal explosives meant to force the submarine to surface. But the submarine's crew doesn't know their practice charges. They think they're under attack. They've lost radio contact with Moscow. For all they know, World War III has already started. The captain wants to launch their nuclear torpedo. The political officer agrees. Soviet protocol requires 3 officers to authorize a nuclear launch. 2 have said yes. The 3rd officer is named Vasily Arkhipov. He says no. He argues. Reason with them. Questions the logic of launching based on incomplete information. Somehow, impossibly, he convinces them to wait. To surface. To make contact before starting a nuclear war. Vasily Arkhipov saved the world. Most people have never heard his name. On October 28th, Khrushchev blinks. Soviet missiles will be removed from Cuba. In exchange, Kennedy privately agrees to remove American missiles from Turkey and promises not to invade Cuba. The crisis ends. The world exhales. But the Cuban Missile Crisis reveals something terrifying. How fragile peace really is. How close we came. Not because leaders wanted war, but because systems failed, information was incomplete, and men under pressure had seconds to make decisions that would affect billions. And it keeps happening. January 1961, Goldsboro, North Carolina. A B-52 bomber breaks apart in mid-air. 2 hydrogen bombs fall toward a small farming town. Each bomb carries 4 megatons of explosive power, 200 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. One bomb's parachute deploys. It lands safely, recoverable, intact. The second plummets into a tobacco field. Later analysis shows that 4 of its 5 safety mechanisms failed on impact. 4 out of 5. One switch. One single switch stood between a peaceful January morning and a nuclear explosion that would have killed everyone within a 17-mile radius and spread fallout across the eastern seaboard. An American nuclear bomb. On American soil, nearly detonating by accident. This is what the Cold War means. Not just superpowers threatening each other, but weapons so powerful that accidents can kill millions. Systems so complex that malfunctions can trigger apocalypse. A 45-year tightrope walk where one stumble could end everything. And the walk keeps getting longer. By the mid-1960s, both superpowers possess enough nuclear weapons for what strategists call overkill capability. Not just enough weapons to destroy the enemy once, enough to destroy them multiple times. The United States has thousands of warheads. The Soviet Union has thousands. Each side can annihilate the other's cities, populations, and military installations several times over. The doctrine has a name: Mutually Assured Destruction. MADE. The acronym is appropriate. The logic is insane, but somehow functional. Build enough weapons to guarantee your enemy's total destruction, and they'll build enough to guarantee yours, and somehow, impossibly, that prevents war. Because there's no winning. There's no scenario where launching nuclear weapons achieves anything except mutual annihilation. First strike, second strike, it doesn't matter. Everyone dies. So nobody launches. The bombs exist to never be used. And that's the paradox that keeps the peace. But nuclear weapons aren't the only battlefield. October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik, a metal sphere the size of a beach ball that orbits Earth every 96 minutes, broadcasting a radio signal anyone can hear. America panics. If the Soviets can put a satellite in orbit, they can deliver a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. The space race begins, not from scientific curiosity, from terror. America pours money into rockets, satellites, and eventually the Apollo program. July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong steps onto the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Also, one massive propaganda victory for the United States. Proof that American technology, American ingenuity, American systems can outpace Soviet capabilities. The Cold War isn't fought just with weapons, it's fought with symbols. Berlin becomes the ultimate symbol. August 13, 1961. East German workers begin stringing barbed wire through the heart of Berlin. Within days, the wire becomes a wall, concrete barriers, guard towers, minefields. The Berlin Wall physically divides a city that was already politically split. Families separated, friends cut off, people living 50 feet apart who might as well be on different planets. The wall stands for 28 years. During that time, over 140 people die trying to cross it, shot by border guards, killed by mines. The lucky ones make it. The rest becomes statistics. President Kennedy visits West Berlin in June 1963. He stands near the wall and delivers a speech that resonates across the divided city. All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin, and therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a Berliner. We are all Berliners. 5 months later, Kennedy is dead, assassinated in Dallas. The world mourns, the Cold War continues, because this is the nature of the conflict. It transcends individual leaders, outlasts presidents and premiers, becomes the permanent background condition of global politics. Children grow up practicing nuclear attack drills in school, learning to hide under desks as if that would save them from a hydrogen bomb. People build fallout shelters in their backyards, plan for survival in a post-apocalyptic world. The psychology of it seeps into everything. Movies, television, literature, all saturated with Cold War anxiety. The enemy is everywhere. Trust nobody. Fear everything. For 45 years, that's the mentality. An entire generation lives with the knowledge that nuclear annihilation could come at any moment, that the world might end before they finish breakfast. And the intelligence services play games in this shadow world. The CIA and KGB fight a secret war. Espionage, sabotage, propaganda. Operations ranging from brilliant to absurd. The CIA's Operation Acoustic Kitty implants microphones and radio transmitters into cats, hoping to use them to spy on Soviet officials. Cost, millions of dollars. Success rate, effectively zero. The first cat is allegedly hit by a taxi on its first mission. Both the CIA and KGB try to blackmail Indonesia's President Sukarno using sex tapes. The KGB uses a real tape. The CIA produces a fake with a lookalike actor. Sukarno's response? He reportedly asks for copies to distribute, being quite proud of his romantic capabilities. The blackmail fails completely. When Mao Zedong visits Moscow in 1949, Soviet scientists secretly collect his feces for analysis, hoping to determine his psychological state from his bowel movements. This is real. This happened. Intelligence agencies of nuclear superpowers analyzing excrement to gain strategic advantage. The absurdity doesn't make it less serious. In the world of intelligence, any advantage matters. Every piece of information could be the one that prevents or triggers escalation. September 26, 1983. The world nearly ends again. Soviet early warning systems detect 5 American intercontinental ballistic missiles launching toward Moscow. The protocol is clear. Report the attack immediately. Retaliation must be swift. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, the officer on duty, has minutes to decide, maybe seconds. He looks at his screen. 5 missiles. 5. America has thousands of nuclear weapons. If they're launching a first strike, why only 5? It doesn't make sense. Petrov makes a decision that violates protocol and could end his career. He reports the alarm as a system malfunction. Does not notify his superiors of an attack. Does not recommend retaliation. He's correct. The satellites mistook sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. The system failed. No missiles were launched, no attack occurred. Stanislav Petrov prevented World War III. He received no medal, no public recognition. His decision almost got him court-martialed. Years later, when the story finally emerged, he received some international honors. But for decades, nobody knew that one Soviet officer, trusting his instinct over his instruments, saved human civilization. These near misses accumulate. Each one reveals how fragile the peace is, how dependent survival is on individuals making correct split-second decisions under impossible pressure. But by the 1970s, something shifts. Détente, a French word meaning relaxation or easing. Both superpowers are exhausted. The arms race is bleeding them dry. The United States is bogged down in Vietnam, facing domestic unrest and economic strain. The Soviet Union can't match American technology or productivity. Both sides need a break. Richard Nixon, the staunch anti-communist, opens diplomatic relations with China, visits Beijing, meets with Mao. The Cold War's stark East versus West division begins to blur. Henry Kissinger shuttles between capitals, practicing what he calls realpolitik, diplomacy based on practical interests rather than ideology. May 26, 1972. Nixon and Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev sign the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, SALT I. For the first time, both superpowers agree to limit their nuclear arsenals. Not eliminate them, not reduce them significantly. Just stop building quite so many. It's a small step. But it's a step. The 1970s bring more agreements, trade deals, cultural exchanges. The Helsinki Accords in 1975 establish principles for international relations and human rights. The Cold War hasn't ended, but it's no longer quite so cold. Beneath the diplomatic surface, nothing has really changed. Both sides still maintain massive nuclear arsenals. The proxy wars continue. Intelligence services still spy, sabotage, and assassinate. But the public rhetoric softens. The apocalyptic tension eases slightly. Then détente dies. December 24, 1979, Christmas Eve. Soviet forces invade Afghanistan. The official reason? Supporting a communist government against insurgents. The reality? Extending Soviet influence into Central Asia. President Jimmy Carter responds by boycotting the 1980 Moscow Olympics and sending weapons to Afghan rebels. Détente is over. Ronald Reagan wins the 1980 election, promising to stand firm against what he calls the evil empire. Military spending increases. The Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, the press calls it, proposes using lasers and missiles to shoot down Soviet ICBMs. The Soviets panic. They can't match American spending, can't compete with American technology. The arms race accelerates again. September 1st, 1983. Korean Airlines Flight 007 strays into Soviet airspace. Soviet fighters scramble. They claim the airliner ignored warnings. They shoot it down. 269 people die, including a United States congressman. The world holds its breath again. Tensions spike. The early 1980s feel like the early 1960s, nuclear war seeming not just possible but probable. Then, in March 1985, everything changes. Mikhail Gorbachev becomes General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party. He's younger than his predecessors. 54 years old in a gerontocracy where leaders have been dying in office. He looks at the Soviet system, the stagnation, the corruption, the economic failure, and realizes something must change. Glasnost, openness, allowing free discussion of political and social issues. Perestroika, restructuring, reforming the Soviet economic system. Revolutionary concepts in a society built on secrecy, centralized control, and resistance to change. Gorbachev meets with Reagan. The two men, ideological opposites, somehow establish rapport. They negotiate. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 1987 eliminates an entire class of nuclear weapons. Not limits them, eliminates them. For the first time, nuclear arsenals actually shrink. June 12, 1987. Ronald Reagan stands at the Brandenburg Gate in West Berlin. The Berlin Wall rises behind him. He delivers 4 words that will echo through history. "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." At the time, it seems like political theatre. Bold rhetoric, but unrealistic. The wall has stood for 26 years. It's not going anywhere. Except it is. Inside the Soviet Union, Gorbachev's reforms are unleashing forces he can't control. Glasnost allows people to speak freely, and they start speaking about everything wrong with the system. Perestroika tries to reform the economy, but decades of central planning have created structural problems that can't be fixed with minor adjustments. The entire edifice is crumbling. In Eastern Europe, satellite states watch the reforms and start pushing their own boundaries. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. The old rules aren't being enforced anymore. The Soviet Union isn't sending in tanks to crush reform movements like it did in 1956 and 1968. Gorbachev has made clear, no more military intervention to preserve communist governments. Each country must find its own path. This changes everything. November 9, 1989. An East German government spokesman, Günter Schabowski, holds a press conference announcing new travel regulations. The restrictions on crossing to West Berlin will be loosened. A reporter asks when this takes effect. Schabowski shuffles his papers, clearly uncertain. "As far as I know, immediately, without delay." Within hours, thousands of East Berliners converge on the wall. They've heard the announcement on television. They demand to cross. Border guards, overwhelmed and receiving no clear orders, don't know what to do. The crowds keep growing. The pressure builds. And then the guards step aside. The flood begins. East and West Berliners embrace. People who haven't seen family in decades reunite. Strangers take hammers and pickaxes to the concrete. The wall that stood for 28 years, that symbolized the Cold War's division more than anything else, falls in a single night. Not from bombs, not from invasion, from people who simply stopped believing in it. The domino effect accelerates. Poland elects a non-communist government. Hungary opens its borders. Czechoslovakia's communist regime falls in the Velvet Revolution, peaceful protests that force the government to resign. Romania's dictator Ceausescu is overthrown and executed. By the end of 1989, every communist government in Eastern Europe except Albania has collapsed or reformed. The Soviet Union itself is disintegrating. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, declare independence. Other republics follow. Gorbachev tries to hold things together, but the centrifugal forces are too strong. The system he tried to reform is collapsing entirely. August 1991. Hardline communists attempt a coup, trying to reverse the reforms and restore the old order. They place Gorbachev under house arrest. Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, rallies opposition. He stands on a tank outside the Russian parliament building, defying the coup plotters. The military refuses to support the coup. It fails within 3 days. But the Soviet Union doesn't recover. The coup attempt was the death blow. One by one, Soviet republics declare independence. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigns as president of the Soviet Union. The Soviet flag lowers over the Kremlin for the last time. The Russian tricolor rises in its place. The Cold War is over. 45 years of tension, proxy wars, nuclear brinkmanship, and ideological struggle end not with the bang everyone feared, but with a quiet dissolution. The Soviet Union simply ceases to exist. Gorbachev later reflects, "Without perestroika, the Cold War simply would not have ended." He's right. The reforms he initiated unleashed forces that swept away the entire system. Whether that was his intention doesn't matter. The result is the same. The world exhales. The nuclear threat recedes. Defense budgets shrink. The peace dividend is supposed to fund domestic programs. A new world order beckons, where international cooperation replaces superpower rivalry. But new conflicts are already emerging. August 2nd, 1990. Iraqi forces invade Kuwait. Saddam Hussein, who spent 8 years fighting Iran with American support, now thinks he can seize Kuwait's oil fields without consequence. He miscalculates. For the first time since World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union find themselves on the same side, both condemning Iraq's invasion. The United Nations Security Council, no longer paralyzed by superpower rivalry, authorizes military action to liberate Kuwait. January 17, 1991. Operation Desert Storm begins. The first major conflict of the post-Cold War world. American-led coalition forces pummel Iraqi positions with airstrikes, smart bombs, cruise missiles, stealth fighters. The world watches on CNN as technology developed during the Cold War arms race is deployed against a regional dictator. But immediately, American commanders face a problem their predecessors never solved. How do you kill an enemy you can't reach? Saddam has learned from history, specifically from Gaddafi's experience when American F-111s bombed his residence in Libya in 1986. Saddam built deep underground bunkers, 50 feet or more beneath the surface, protected by reinforced concrete measured in feet, not inches. Command and control centers, communications facilities, places where leadership can survive sustained bombing. American intelligence identifies key targets. Al-Taji Air Base, north of Baghdad. Hardened bunkers where Iraqi leadership might be sheltering. Standard bombs don't work. Even the BLU-109 penetrator bombs, designed to punch through hardened targets, can't reach deep enough. They penetrate maybe 20 feet of reinforced concrete. These bunkers have twice that, plus earth and rock on top. Pentagon officials face a choice: accept that some targets are simply unreachable, or build a weapon that doesn't exist. They choose option 2, and they have 10 weeks to do it. The engineers at Lockheed and the Air Force Armament Laboratory look at the problem. Penetrate at least 20 feet of reinforced concrete or 100 feet of earth, and still have enough explosive force left to destroy whatever's inside. The physics are daunting. Conventional shaped charges won't work. Too much penetration required. The explosive power disperses before reaching the target. The solution is audacious. Don't build a bomb from scratch. Take something that already exists, surplus artillery barrels from M201 howitzers. 8-inch diameter tubes made of thick, hardened steel. These barrels were built to withstand the pressure of firing 203mm shells. They're incredibly dense, incredibly strong. Pack them with explosive. Add tail fins for stability. Attach a guidance system. Put a hardened penetrator tip on the front. Call it the GBU-28, Guided Bomb Unit 28. Officially, the Bunker Buster. Unofficially, Deep Throat. Weight, 5,000 pounds. Length, almost 19 feet. Most of that weight isn't explosive, it's mass. Kinetic energy. A spear falling from the sky at terminal velocity, letting physics do most of the work. From concept to deployment, 2 weeks, not months, not years. 14 days from "we need this weapon" to "here are working bombs ready to drop." It's an impossible timeline. But Desert Storm is already underway. The war won't wait for normal development cycles. Teams work around the clock. Testing is minimal. No time for the usual rigorous evaluation. They build 2 prototypes, confirm they survive being dropped, and ship them to the Gulf. February 27, 1991. 2 F-111F strike fighters, call signs Cardinal 71 and Cardinal 72, approach Al-Taji Air Base carrying the only two GBU-28s in existence. Each aircraft carries one bomb. Target: hardened command bunker believed to house Iraqi leadership. Cardinal 71 releases first. The PAVE TAC targeting system tracks the bomb's descent. Miss. The bomb impacts 20 feet from the bunker entrance. Close, but not close enough. Cardinal 72, tail number 70-22387, makes its approach. Pilot releases. The bomb separates cleanly. Guidance fins adjust trajectory. The targeting pod records everything. 5,000 pounds of steel and explosive accelerating toward the ground. Direct hit. The bomb strikes the bunker roof and vanishes into the structure. For a moment, nothing visible happens. Then smoke begins pouring from ventilation shafts throughout the complex. The explosion inside was catastrophic. Precisely what the weapon was designed to do: penetrate, then detonate deep inside, where the blast is contained and magnified by the surrounding structure. The bunker Saddam Hussein called impregnable has been penetrated. Whether Iraqi leadership was actually inside that specific bunker is uncertain, but the psychological impact is immediate. Nowhere is safe. Even 50 feet of concrete and earth can't protect you. Not anymore. The next day, February 28th, Iraq agrees to a ceasefire. The ground war lasted exactly 100 hours. Precision weapons, smart bombs, technologies developed during the Cold War arms race, all deployed with devastating effectiveness against a conventional military force. The GBU-28 becomes standard equipment in the American arsenal. Improved versions see action in every subsequent conflict. Afghanistan, Iraq again in 2003. Anytime there's a hardened target that needs destroying, the bunker buster is the solution. From 45 years of nuclear standoff to 2 weeks of desperate innovation. The Cold War taught a generation of engineers to think in terms of absolute destruction, to solve problems that seemed impossible, to build weapons that redefined what warfare could achieve. Those skills, that mentality, didn't disappear when the Berlin Wall fell. The Cold War shaped everything: technology, politics, culture, psychology. An entire generation grew up with the certainty that the world could end at any moment, that nuclear war wasn't just possible but inevitable, that they probably wouldn't live to see old age. They were wrong. The war everyone expected never happened. The weapons built to destroy civilization were never used in the way they were designed. Mutually assured destruction worked, insanely enough. The threat of total annihilation prevented the actual annihilation. But the cost was real. 11 million dead in proxy wars. $8 trillion spent by the United States alone on military forces and weapons. Entire nations devastated by conflicts they didn't start, fighting over ideologies they didn't necessarily believe in, serving as battlegrounds for superpowers that couldn't fight each other directly. The families separated by the Berlin Wall, the children who grew up practicing nuclear attack drills, the soldiers who died in Korean rice paddies and Vietnamese jungles and Afghan mountains, the civilians caught in crossfire from Angola to Nicaragua. Their sacrifice was real, even if the war was cold for the superpowers themselves. And the near misses, the accidents, the times we came within minutes, within seconds, within one person's decision from nuclear war. Vasily Arkhipov in his submarine, Stanislav Petrov at his console. The bomb that fell on Goldsboro with only one functioning safety mechanism. We survived not because our systems were perfect, but because we were lucky. Because individual humans made correct split-second decisions under impossible pressure. The Cold War taught us that walls fall, empires crumble, and certainty is an illusion. The Soviet Union seemed permanent, its power unshakable. Then it dissolved in less than a year. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years. Then it fell in a single night. Nothing is as stable as it appears. It taught us that the most destructive weapons are sometimes the ones never used. Nuclear arsenals prevented the Third World War not by fighting it, but by making it unthinkable. The existence of the bombs, the credible threat of mutual annihilation, created a terrible form of peace. It taught us that peace is fragile, maintained not by perfect systems, but by imperfect humans making choices under pressure. Trust is earned slowly and destroyed quickly. Communication prevents more wars than weapons do. The hotline between Washington and Moscow, installed after the Cuban Missile Crisis, probably prevented more conflicts than any missile system. And finally, it taught us that innovation happens fastest under pressure. The GBU-28, designed and built in 2 weeks. The Berlin airlift, organized in days. The space program, driven by competition. When the stakes are high enough, when failure is unacceptable, humans accomplish impossible things. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union is gone. The Berlin Wall is rubble sold as souvenirs. But the lessons remain. The technologies developed then still shape warfare now. The geopolitical realignments still affect current conflicts. The psychological impact, that sense of living under permanent threat, marked an entire generation. We walked a tightrope for 45 years. We didn't fall. That's something. Maybe even something to be proud of. Not that we built enough weapons to destroy civilization, but that we built them, pointed them at each other, and somehow never pulled the trigger. The bunker in Iraq proved that nowhere is safe, that no fortress is impregnable, that human ingenuity can overcome any defense. But the Cold War proved something more important, that human restraint, however fragile and imperfect, can prevent the ultimate catastrophe. Both lessons matter. Both shape the world we live in now. The weapons get smarter, the defenses get stronger. But the fundamental question remains the same. Will we use restraint when it matters most? Will the individual humans who make the critical decisions choose preservation over destruction? For 45 years they did. The tightrope held, and that's the story. Not of weapons or walls or ideology, but of humans choosing, again and again, not to end the world, even when they had the power, even when the pressure was immense,